and welcome to Modern Police Practices. This is the first presentation in an ongoing series organized by the Criminal Justice Reform Committee of the League of Women Voters, Mount Baldy area. Before we begin, a few announcements. This coming Saturday, March 26th, is the League of Women Voters Los Angeles County Convention. This convention will be virtual and is open to all current League members. Registration is required. If you're interested in attending, please indicate in the chat along with your email, and details will be provided to you. On Sunday, April 10th at 2 p.m., the League of Women Voters Mount Baldy area, in partnership with the San Gabriel Valley Tenants Union and LA Forward, will host the last in a three-part dialogue on housing elements. At its final event, we will discuss Claremont's housing element and how it can be utilized for advocacy and accountability in housing. This event was previously scheduled for Sunday, April 3rd, and has been postponed 1 week to the 10th. If you already had it in your calendar, thanks. And be sure to move it so that we can see you on April 10th. This has been a great series. I think you will enjoy it. I hope to see you there. The 2022 California primary is right around the corner, and volunteers are needed to join the Voter Service Committee. Are you interested in getting out the vote, helping with candidate forums, or learning more about ballot proposition to do pros and cons? There is great work for everyone. If you're interested in being a part of our voter service efforts, please indicate in the chat along with your email, and details will be provided. Lastly, many of you, like me, have probably spent some part of the last couple of days paying attention to the Supreme Court nomination hearings for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. While there's so much to say about her historic nomination, it is not lost on me that her record on matters of criminal justice have been called into question on partisan bases. I am proud and honored to be part of the League of Women Voters, an organization that sets partisanship aside and gets to the heart of issues, an organization that starts with education and not opinions. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce Sherry Classic, the chair of the Criminal Justice Committee, who will get us off on this evening's program. Thank you so much, Sherry.
Thank you, Rachel. So I did want to also mention other members of the Criminal Justice Committee. They are Jessica McLaughlin, Maritza Rodriguez, and Gina Trexler Sousa. We are planning further programs in the criminal justice series for later in the spring and this fall. This evening, we have invited Corporal Lewis to discuss modern policing practices. Corporal Lewis grew up in a Navy family and therefore was drawn to a life of service in uniform. He has kept with that theme in his own family, as his wife is a detective in the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. The first step in his own service was as a police explorer in the Laguna Beach Police Department. His career as a full police officer began in the County of Los Angeles Police Department in 1999. He came to the Pomona Police Department in 2007. His roles there have included field training officer, tactics instructor, training unit coordinator, mobile field force member, dignitary protection team leader, and patrol supervisor. Currently, he's serving on the PPD SWAT team and is working in the community programs unit. These community programs include a partnership with the Pomona Unified School District. Other programs include Neighborhood Watch, Santa Cop, Cops for Kids, Citizens Academy, and organizing community meetings and events. This evening, Corporal Lewis will emphasize 3 points from the League of Women Voters of California criminal justice position in policing practices. And I wanted to show you those so you could see them as I read them. He's going to talk about the importance to build public trust and positive community relationships through police engagement with community members, encourage community participation in the development of policing policy, train police to identify individuals with mental health conditions, disabilities, or substance abuse or addiction, so that officers will request support from appropriate medical and mental health professionals with the goal of diverting those individuals into treatment instead of jail. The corporal will also add information about Pomona police programs which speak to other parts of the position, because the position has more than just those 3 points. Maritza will be placing a link to the full position in the chat. You may find this useful in posing questions during the Q&A at the end. As usual, put your questions in the chat for Rachel to ask. There's the link right now. And now, Corporal Lewis.
Thank you, Jerry. I feel pressured. You sound so impressive and professional. I'm like, I hope I can keep up. So I guess I'll just start with saying hello to everybody. She told you who I am and the essence of what we do. When the League of Women Voters reached out to our agency, they sent you guys my way because they thought I'd be well suited to kind of explain to you our position regarding some of those issues, and particularly the 3 you guys named in particular. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I do from a day-to-day basis, because it'll give you a foundation. If you guys have a particular format for questions, I'll let you guys moderate that. Otherwise, I have no problem taking questions at any point, because that's what it's all about. So I'm going to attempt to screen share. We did this successfully once, and if it happens a second time, then I'm going to buy a lottery ticket on the way home, because it means I'm doing something right. Can everybody see that? Community police programs unit type of, okay, we got it. I see some heads nodding, makes me happy. Okay. So I work for the community programs unit of the Pomona Police Department. And my department is about approximately 150 sworn with about 100 civilians. Those numbers fluctuate. When I came on the department, we had almost 205 sworn. We plummeted to 140 recently, and we're scratching our way back up into the 150s. I think we're 152 specifically. We would like to get back to around 160, which still keeps us understaffed by FBI standards, but we think we can manage with that until we can develop some new strategies. The pictures have no real relevance, except they just give you something to look at as I'm talking, so you can kind of get a little feel for the department. They might prompt some questions. And I'm going to bounce around a couple of topics. I know that one of the issues you guys talked about was diversity. For a police department to effectively police its community, it needs to reflect that community. That's not a tagline, that's the honest to God's truth. Not only, if you look at the upper left corner, you'll see a group of officers in a variety of uniforms, including sort of a green one in the middle. And that's what we call our diversity recruitment team. Based on ethnic, gender, their own identification, whether it's LGBTQ, we have a variety of people who can reach out so that whatever demographic you feel best suited to, you can reach someone in our department who can encourage you and explain the process of recruitment, and sort of give you their parallel experience. So that if you're intimidated by the idea of getting into policing, we don't want that to be an impediment to diversifying our ranks. So we have specialist officers who address those issues and kind of help bridge that gap. My specific office is the community programs unit. And essentially all of our department has an obligation to reach out to the community, but we're the only office full-time assigned to that. I have, that is our primary function. So that's me in the upper left corner with the big ears. And then the two ladies to the right of me are Norma Macy and Natalie Diaz. They're both amazing assets. If anything ever goes right in this office, it's 100% them because they're phenomenal. They're both long-term employees. Norma's 24 years, I think, with the department. So it's not a job for them. It's a career. They really are into what they do. Since 2021, we've been reassigned to the quality of life unit, which means it really diversified my experience. Rather than being just community relations, we now overlap with our mental health unit, our sexual exploitation trafficking team, the homeless outreach and homeless encampment response units. We have responsibility. I supervise directly our school resource officers, which we call Pomona resource officers in our city. And I am the direct liaison with the Department of Children and Family Services for child abuse responses, which is a daily operation for us, sadly to say. What do we do? We've been part of our department for 30 years, the Community Programs Unit. We started all the way back at our infancy by police officers taking up collections and coffee cans in our briefing room every day to buy Christmas trees for people who didn't have them in the city. And that evolved to where it is a federally funded position. So my salary directly is funded by the federal government for the exclusive purpose of community-based policing, community relations. That means if we have shortages in patrol, they can't shift me into patrol. I am committed to this. This is my only job. And as long as what I do overlaps with that function, then I can assist. But there's never a time when they'll do away with this position. Specifically by unit, we support 30 neighborhood watch groups in the city. Some of them are more active than others. We have 10 that are really, really active, and probably around 20 and change that are sort of kind of peripherals. They meet once in a while. We don't manage those. We don't have any decision on the membership. We just support them. So sometimes they come off really enthusiastic, and then there's a change in residency, and maybe the person who's running that show, it doesn't have an adequate replacement, so they kind of linger around a little bit. But that is our direct responsibility. My office has, we do something called Coffee with a Cop, and this goes to the community policing. How do you get public engagement? How do you encourage the public to be involved? So as you can see, those just random pictures of different coffee locations. We speak with the public. We set up at a Starbucks, a Farmer Boys, a McDonald's, a Denny's, and we provide the coffee. You provide the conversation. And you could have the chief there, sergeants, officers, dispatchers, a whole variety of staff. There's usually several. And we want to encourage people to walk up and have an opportunity to speak to their police. In every way, we're a public service organization, and you can't serve your, I guess you could say, customer base if you don't understand their needs. I'm pretty proud to say I worked at another agency before, and so I have a contrast. The Pomona Police Department is really has a good rapport with this community. I have some anecdotal evidence of that. It's not just an opinion I have kind of capriciously. It's actually like I have evidence to support this. And it's things like this where people feel comfortable walking up, talking to the police, sharing their concerns, addressing different things with them that they want us to focus on, be it speeders, be it crime trends. That sometimes don't understand how come it took us, an hour to get to the call when I called you today, and we can educate them as to our staffing and our response times and why some response times vary so radically. So it's a cool opportunity for just open-ended dialogue. We have a program called Every 15 Minutes. It's graphic, it's emotional. If you have the time for it, I would encourage you maybe to jump onto YouTube and Google up the term, or search, I should say, if you're on YouTube, the term Every 15 Minutes Pomona. We're doing one for Pomona Catholic. I think is our next one, and that's in, gosh, it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And what we do is we replicate a car crash in front of their school using their own students as role players. One of those role players will be arrested. One of those role players will die at the scene, and one of those role players will later die in the emergency room. And it's all captured on video, very high quality level production, as you see when you watch it on YouTube. And then we show it in the school. And for some of these kids, the idea, and to be honest with a lot of adults even, the idea of a DUI is this kind of like abstract concept. But when they see up front the reality of it, it shocks a lot of them into paying attention. And nationally, since this program was introduced, DUI fatalities with high school kids, particularly graduating classes, has declined. and across the state. We actually have some other programs that aren't run from my office about DUI education. I'm pretty passionate about it. I'm really into DUI education and enforcement, but this is the one that my office does work with. And we do this in cooperation with the Pomona Unified School District, the CHP, the fire department, the coroner's office, the district attorney's office. There's about 10 separate organizations that support this, all the way down to tow yards, which then provide a matching totaled car that we can also correspond with a student's car. So in the video, the student's driving a gold Honda Civic. For the accident we staged in front of their school, it's going to be a gold Honda Civic. Like, we make this as realistic as possible. So that's a really cool program, and it saves lives. It's really pretty amazing. Our National Night Out. It's a national program. We don't have any claim to organizing this initially, but we just bring it to our community. We didn't have it obviously the past 2 years. I don't know if you guys heard, if you guys ever heard, there's this thing called COVID. Maybe you heard about it, I don't know. It kind of ruined everything. So we couldn't have it, but we're going to have it hopefully in 2023. It's a huge community event. We invite community groups, whether they're service providers, whether they're church groups, charity groups, cultural groups, art museums, everything, to come out and just get people talking and visiting and seeing what their city has to offer. It creates a sense of community. A sense of community creates pride in your community, and that reduces crime. And that's our strong involvement in it. So National Night Out. One of my favorite functions is our Santa Cop Toy Drive. We've been doing that for about 20 years. And we've been holding a version of it since the 1980s. What we do is we hold a series of fundraising events, charity events. Our next one will be a golf tournament. Any golfers here? I'll put my email in there. Email me. We'll get you into the golf tournament. And we raise money. And that's grown exponentially the past several years. If there's an upside to COVID, is people really opened their pocketbooks and really got into their community. We used to run this event on around $6,000 or $8,000 a year. And last year we hit almost $42,000 in donations. As you can see, those go to toys. So that lower right corner is our city hall. We convert it to a massive toy shop, and children go in and pick a toy. If 2 or 3, help yourself, kid. Like, we want them to have a great day, a positive experience. They get to meet Santa. This year we had Anna and Elsa. They take pictures with them at a photo booth, and they get to take toys. If they take toys that have batteries, we provide the batteries. We want them to have this really cool experience. We reached over 1,000 kids this year, which translated to a little over 400 families. And predictably, when you hold this event, the kids are excited. But as a parent myself, the unexpected consequence when you did this was seeing parents who cried or got really emotionally invested because they would not have otherwise have had toys for their kids, or maybe couldn't afford the quality of some of the ones we were able to provide for them. So it's just a phenomenal event. It's really exciting. If you have a chance in December to come visit, please do. It's a really neat thing, and it's one of the things I'm most proud of out of our office. We run a Cops for Kids program. This is in partnership with the Pomona Unified School District. It's funded by itself. So there's a membership fee, $20 for the kids to participate. That pays for the study materials, the t-shirts, and then private donations supply the other stuff. This year, we're even looking at maybe partnering with PUSD to provide food for their classes. And it's an instructional thing. It's a pride building exercise. The kids get to earn something. They earn this title of when they graduate Cops for Kids. They earn a t-shirt, and people go, well, what's the purpose of that? Like, what were you that for? The simple solution, it reduces crime long-term. These are children from a variety of schools. And in the current world, at least in our community, it's not uncommon for the wrong person to enter the wrong park or neighborhood, and that becomes a source of conflict. And we now have a couple of years of kids who, instead of seeing a stranger when they enter a park, because that kid's from another school, not sure who he is, they remember that kid. Hey, I remember you. We were in Cops for Kids together 2 years ago. Oh, that's right. And then it's broken introduction. It's created a bond. It's created a sense of community. A lot of these kids are really lacking some kind of discipline in their own home, and they like the structure. It's not a boot camp. It's not a scared straight program. There is a component of physical fitness, and we emphasize. And so we do push-ups and sit-ups, but we do it with them. It's not, yelling at them, try and break kids. We want to build them up. We teach them how to study for a project, identify career goals. It is not intended to recruit people to be police officers, but it's intended to introduce to them a concept of what we do for them, have a friendly face. They build relationships, particularly with our school resource officers, and they earn something, and it creates a sense of pride. We had a premature termination to the session when COVID started, and have been inundated with parents and kids wanting to know when we're going to hold the conclusion of that years later, because they want to graduate still. So our last session was the, I guess, fall winter session of 2020, 19 into 20, and people are still want that conclusion. And we're going to do our next full session will begin again in the fall, because people are chomping at the bit to get us to start that again. So within my office, we do a couple other small things. We respond to random needs within the community. I've helped pay for people's tow trucks. We've got beds for kids who didn't have a bed because they were sleeping on the floor. Someone's bike's been stolen. We've replaced bicycles. We connect needs in the community with donation sources. Sometimes we have donors who are willing to cut us a large check, but they don't want to cut it to the community in an ambiguous form. They feel there's some credibility if they donate that fund to the police department. There's some tracking, there's accountability. They know their money achieved a certain goal, be it bicycles, food, school supplies. So we work as that nice nexus. We support public events for other work groups within the department. So other organizations within our department that aren't really equipped to set up public meetings or events will help them with that. We support the chief's office with public outreach. And again, we head the fundraising programs. We also have a Citizens Academy. We run in English and Spanish. I didn't plug that slide in because I was pressed for time today, but that's a really neat program. We put between 20 and 30 people in usually and educate them to the inner workings of our department, our policies, our procedures. And it's a pretty open book. So they get to see a lot of behind the scenes. And that's our agency. Our station was built back in the 1960s and we still got it running. So we're frugal. We make our money last. And then because a lot of people want to talk about the community-based policing, I like to remind people from my own selfish perspective, perhaps, that freedom isn't free. We have lost 8 peace officers in the history of my department, including 1 CHP officer who was killed serving the citizens of Pomona in our city. Some of those recently. Gregory Casillas was a trainee of mine. Sean Diamond was a partner. Daniel Freams was a phenomenal person, an orphan from another country who immigrated this country and lived his dream. So I like to just remind people that we serve the department. We do a lot of really fun, cool things, but sometimes we do some dangerous stuff too. And we do it in the name of public safety and service. Proud to do so, by the way. And that is my little presentation. I'll allow you guys to ask some questions and we can cover some of these other 3 topics.
Thank you so much, Corporal Lewis.
You're welcome, Rachel.
We have a few questions in the chat. I will go ahead and moderate those, but I didn't know if there was anything that I wanted to open it up first to see if there was anything from our committee, if they wanted to add anything before we went on to the question and answer.
Yes, Corporal Lewis, can you go into a little more detail about what your department does if they're called about someone who's in a mental health crisis, what you use in the way of resources for approaching that person rather than just a police officer, or what resources do you use?
Excellent question. We have a couple of resources we use. We have years ago, actually, we were ahead of the curve, not because we were trying to be pioneers, but because we were just trying to be creative and solve some problems we had. Pomona statistically seems to have a higher call for service ratio involving people in mental health crises than our neighboring cities. So we really had to kind of get creative on how we could keep up with that pace. So we partnered with Tri-City, which is a mental health organization here in our city. Phenomenal organization. I really think highly of them, and got some training for our personnel. And when I say personnel, it was everybody from the chief to the jailers to the parking enforcement personnel to officers of all ranks. And it was a 2-day session on mental health. They went so detailed as to actually have people experiencing different mental health crises come in and speak about what it was like to be bipolar, to have depression, to experience PTSD, and how responding and reacting to them can trigger events inside them, or what that experience was like. We then followed that up with another block of training held by the district attorney's office, which was just world class. The head instructor was the highest ranking female command staff from LAPD, who then went to the district attorney's office and pioneered that program. So she brought an unbelievable amount of experience with her, and we followed that training. We also have post training. Post is a regulatory agency which controls peace officer training. It stands for Peace Officers Standards and Training. So we can't just go take a training class that someone offers. We have to go through post to make sure that training is validated, the people are actual true subject matter experts. And so we take post training regularly, both online training classes and then in service ones like videos we watch, training topics we'll discuss in our briefing. We also partnered with the LA County Department of Mental Health. We have 7-day-a-week coverage of what we call the MHU, the mental health unit. But they have different versions of, some people call them a crisis team, a mental health team, PET teams, but it's a partnership between a trained clinician and a peace officer. The peace officers that we partner with drive an unmarked vehicle and typically wear a softer uniform. It's like a polo shirt and like some tan pants. And their role is far more to ensure the safety of the clinician, because there's not too many clinicians that want to go in these scenarios unarmed or unprotected. So that partnership is a real unique one. We were kind of ahead of the curve compared to a lot of jurisdictions. So we've actually had a lot of people reaching out to us in the past 12 months, since a lot of talk of police reform has kind of become a national spotlight issue, and ask us, hey, how did you do that? Talk to us about it. It's monumentally successful. And they, like I said, 7-day-a-week coverage. In addition to that, that clinician is part of our Pomona family. I mean, they work in our stations. We see them every day. They drive our cars. They know our radios. So we build a relationship with them, and they can provide that real friendly coworker guidance to people sometimes. And then we also have the school districts have their own partnership with a different organization to service children who are having a mental health crisis on the campus. As a general rule, we try to avoid police officer personnel responding to those crises unless other resources are not available. When they do, we have to rely on our training. We have a pretty good track record of working with mentally ill people and success getting them into therapy, whether it be they're admitted, counseling sessions, taking people down to the hospital, and plugging them into the resources that they need.
What is your feeling about the supply of actual resources to take these people who are in a crisis? Do you feel like there's enough in the way of services for them, or is California kind of falling down on the job? It sounds like I'm a little biased here. I'm wondering if the state needs to do more.
From where I stand on the terrain that I walk on a daily basis, it doesn't feel like there are enough resources.
Okay.
But you might ask a clinician and they might have a different opinion, or a medical doctor or a school teacher. When I say that, it's because my interaction in my 23 years on the job with people in a mental health crisis is it on a Friday night at 2 a.m. And there's no one to find sometimes. And it's monumentally expensive to staff a city resource with 7-day-a-week, 365-day-a-year coverage, including people get hurt, they take vacation times, they have FMLA leave. I don't know that the state or anybody is ready to staff 24/7 social workers to respond to crises. So the way it looks now, if you have a mental health crisis, more often than not, what you're going to get are 2 police officers, an ambulance, and a fire engine. And I don't know that that's the best tools for the job. I have personal opinions on that. But that's all there is right now. So I think, no, I think from where I stand, it looks like we could do more.
All right. I think we've got a couple of questions in the chat we can get to. And the first one was on the neighborhood watch, and it was, what's the future of Pomona's neighborhood watch program, and how, I'm gonna try and read this. How do residents who want, how, I think there was maybe a typo here. I'm gonna try and get it out. I'm gonna try and transcribe this well, but how do residents who want to try and make it successful?
So it sounds like, where do we see the future of the neighborhood watch program going?
Mhm.
We would like to see it grow, but it's a self-governing, self-generating mechanism. So we go to community events, we offer it, we give people the papers where we have this, we will help you set it up. We'll provide the support, the signage, the training. But in the end, that requires communities to interact with one another and residents to generate that, have their meetings, and then respond from there on out. Like, if they see something suspicious, they need to call on it. They need to take ownership of their community. They have to be willing to talk to each other. And that's not something we can generate. That's the chemistry of a community. Sometimes there's roadblocks to that we have to try and help them work through. And sometimes they're pretty successful. So we have about 10 programs in the community right now that are really successful. They're active, they're participating in various activities. They have a voice politically, they're engaged. And I would like to see more of them, but we can put out the milk, but the cat has to come drink it himself. So.
Would you say that they are well dispersed throughout the community, or do they tend to be in specific areas?
I would say they're pretty concentrated. We have entire portions of the city that have no real neighborhood watch presence. It's sort of, I don't want to say common knowledge in policing, but I think at least it's common perception, whether it's factual or not, that rental communities tend to have less involvement. Launching a neighborhood watch program in an apartment complex or a block dominated by rental property homes is a lot more challenging than a home or community with ownership. Gated communities tend to have a much stronger sense of ownership over that community, and they're much more engaged and willing to participate. And this is kind of just something we know as cops, but we can't, I don't know that I can give you the statistics behind that. But anecdotally, when I think of the communities that have a really strong neighborhood presence, and what I mean is that they have meetings and they call. Somebody's, walking door to door acting suspicious, we'll get 2 or 3 calls from that community before the guy gets to the end of the block. Those tend to be our gated communities and our more established older communities, meaning not new build homes and not a lot of homes where there's a lot of turnover, if you will. Apartment complexes, I don't know. I mean, it seems like we don't get those calls until it's already turned into a crime. But that's a perception, not a factual basis for that.
Maritza.
Okay, the question that you asked on neighborhood watch, sorry, my baby's in the background screaming. I noticed that on the census, Pomona is surrounded by 7 cities. Is that affecting the involvement or with neighborhood watch? It's a lot of cities to be surrounded by. So it's 7 cities, including Claremont, Laverne, San Dimas. So is that affecting or causing more challenges for these neighborhoods?
I understand the question now. I don't think so, because we tend to act kind of in isolation. And just to put it really politely, we don't have gangsters coming in from Claremont or Laverne committing their crimes. They're not high crime cities. They're very small communities with a very strong established sense of community in them. So they don't present challenges to us really, I think, at all. If anything, some of those community groups within, like Laverne, for example, they're so eager to help, and there's just not a lot of problems to fix in Laverne, so they come and help us. So if anything, I would think neighbors like that, good neighbors, are a positive, not a negative.
And we got a question here. Do you have relationships with neighboring police departments? And then kind of a follow-up, like if you do, how often would you be meeting with these departments?
We do have good relationships. We have strong partnerships. One thing that I guess I could maybe share with you guys that it always seems like one of those aha moments for the public. When people think of the police, they invariably think of a black and white police car and a uniformed police officer driving down the street. That's what most people think of the police. The reality is that is probably the bulk. That's the infantry of law enforcement, but it's hardly the bulk of it numerically. So we have a relationship with the California Highway Patrol, which is a tremendous resource. In fact, they've supplied 2 police officers to our agency, our gang unit, for almost 5 years. So the state paid for that. It didn't cost us a penny. And those guys were phenomenal gang investigators and impacted a ton of crime. And gangsters tend to have their, I'll say, tentacles into a lot of crime. They're involved in drugs, they're involved in prostitution, they're involved in stolen vehicles and burglaries and guns. So the impact gangs has a ripple effect on crime. We cooperate regularly with ABC, for alcohol beverage control. They come down to alcohol enforcement. They assist us by funding tobacco enforcement for juveniles. They do shoulder taps where they try and get people to buy alcohol for underage decoys and enforce them. We are part of a regional support unit so that our helicopter provides police helicopter coverage for other cities, and then they in turn also provide it for us. So the helicopter overhead on a Friday night could be a Pomona police helicopter. It could be from Ontario. It could be from Pasadena. It could be from LA Sheriff's Department. So that their overlap with other agencies is phenomenal. And that trickles all the way down to probation, to DA's investigators. So I guess what I'm getting at in a long answer is the relationships we have with other departments is, I don't think you could say weekly be an exaggeration, even daily would be a believable answer to me, because we're always interacting with somebody on some level, be it investigation, an internal affairs issue, task forces, grants. Hey, we have $2 million to spend. Let's spend it in Pomona and help impact your community. And we're like, yeah, come on down, state of California, or come on down, county of LA. So that's a very, we have great relationships with neighboring agencies.
Love to hear that. There is a raised hand here, so I'm going to go ahead. I'd like to remind you that this is being recorded, so if you would rather put it into the chat, otherwise, go ahead and you can go ahead and unmute. I can't quite hear you, Jennifer. So maybe there's a little problem with your audio.
Oh, I thought I was typing something.
Oh.
But I'm happy to ask. I'm curious about because Claremont has started addressing prostitution down by the 10 freeway in Indian Hill. I'm interested in what Pomona has done and is doing on behalf of the women who are in prostitution.
That's a good question. I can give you an intimate answer because until about 2 hours ago, that's what I was doing, was assisting our SET team, sexual exploitation trafficking team, with a anti-prostitution operation. There's 2 ways to look at prostitution, and they're both credible. So sometimes people, and unfortunately the whole world is very politically partisan now, but I think the truth is usually right in the middle. Human trafficking is a real problem. When you become aware of how serious it is, it's mind-boggling how frequent it is. It's happening everywhere. It's right under our nose and we don't even know it. People think human trafficking and they think prostitutes on the corner. It happens on so many more complex levels than it's almost impossible to get into it without derailing this whole conversation. So we treat every woman, or for that matter, we have some males too, that we encounter in a sex worker capacity as a potential victim. If they're underage, they're immediately taken into protective custody, and the whole process is to get them back to their family, if they're runaways, if they're wards of the state. And sadly, that's quite common, even today, as in like hours ago today. And they have no choice, we take them. If they're over age 18, depending on their level of involvement, we provide them services. We tuck a business card in their property if they're booked. We offer them flyers. There are organizations that specialize in helping people get out of that lifestyle. And sometimes they slap your hand away and tell you out of their face, but we're going to make the effort. And if it takes, our mindset, sometimes you can't chop a tree down with the first whack. So it may take 20, 30, 40 attempts to lure someone out of that lifestyle. So there's that component where we treat them as a victim and attempt to rescue them. Having said that, also prostitution, regardless of any political beliefs one may have, we have the statistics that validate it erodes a sense of community. Crime occurs around them. I personally do not believe prostitution is a victimless crime, although I have heard the argument that it is, and I will tell that person they're completely wrong. Anybody who wants to debate it, I'll give you my phone number and we'll tell stories, but we still treat that as a criminal offense. So if a young lady does not want the help, then we're going to introduce you to a jail cell. Currently, unfortunately, the district attorney in LA County is not filing charges for those violations. So we have to be very creative. And our chief's standing policy is if the DA doesn't want to do his job, it doesn't mean we're not going to do our job. We still enforce laws as we always have. We took an oath and we're going to obey it. And that's our standing policy. If the DA wants to not file on their end, that's up to them. And we'll just stop there because that could get political quick. So those are the two ways we look at it. We are currently circling around the legalities of publishing the name of Johns or their customers. Johns is the slang term for the prostitute's customer. And we may have a judgment on that from our city attorney here in the near future. We still, when they get arrested, even if they're not going to get charged, well, we're still towing your car. We're still writing a citation. And we try and make them as uncomfortable as possible. So I know they say it's the world's oldest profession and it's probably not going anywhere, but it's not welcome on East Holt and in Pomona. So we're going to make sure that's at least our stance.
I have a follow-up on that. What are services? When you say offer services, because this has been something that's come up at so many of our police commission or at the police commission meetings in Claremont. And I'm very curious as to what services are.
There are some organizations, two locally and some regionally, which will provide assistance to help a young woman get out. Those services include, for example, providing them a backpack. That backpack has a cell phone charger, a clean cell phone, because most of their cell phones are provided by their pimps. Attire that they can wear in public and not be mistaken for someone who's working. Calling cards to reach out to family. Our department's so enthusiastic about getting these people back where they need to be that we'll pay for your bus ticket and drive you to the station, get you home. We just give us a phone call to someone on the other side of the country, wherever you're from, who says, yeah, this is where they're at, and we're here to receive you, and we'll pay for you. In fact, we just bought a plane ticket, I think, this week to get someone back, reconnecting with their family. I don't have a tremendous amount of experience. I never specialized in human trafficking. My wife has done this type of stuff for some time before she transitioned to a detective, and I assist them. And sadly enough, quite a few of these young women that get sucked into this lifestyle, and I think they get sucked into it. They get baited and tricked. It's not a conscious choice, and then they just kind of don't like it anymore. They're as captive as if there's chains on them, even though there's no one within 100 feet of them, and they're walking down the street, and it appears they can just walk away. They really can't, and that's a complex issue. The majority of them will freely admit when they're in a mood to talk to you, I hate this lifestyle. I want nothing to do with it. And I got tricked. I thought it was more glamorous. I thought it would be better. I thought it was easy money, or I hated my family, or I had nowhere to turn. I just needed to make a couple bucks. And at the street level for prostitution, there's a lot of those poor women are trapped. So we give them an avenue to plug into, get them a hotel, connect them with their family, buy them something, get them some clothes, give them some food, give them a way out is probably the easiest way to say it. And then those specific organizations, and my email's in there. If you want it, anyone wants to email me, I will give you the information for the specific organization so you can connect with them in case you want to volunteer, provide donations, or have questions for them.
Thank you. And then I had another follow-up from earlier. Let me find my note. Oop, I lost it. It was about the work that you have been doing with the mental health providers, or, you know, mental health officers working. You've said it's successful, and I'm absolutely sure that it is, but what are your measurables for that, for the success of that program?
That's a good question, and I'm not prepared with statistics for you. So, but the anecdotal evidence is that, and I cringe to say this because when I came on 23 years ago, if we went to a location, there was somebody acting irrational and had armed themselves with a stick or a baseball bat, without exaggeration, we were told, our training academy was, you ask them once, you tell them the second time, the third time you make them comply. And that was our training, ask, make, or ask, tell, make. And now anybody who wants to watch, even if it's on, I don't think it's on anymore, but live PD, or wants to come on a ride along with the Pomona Police Department, will see us interact with people in various states of mental health daily. And when a police officer walks up and some guy's got a baseball bat and he's like, I'm going to kill you. 20 years ago, we just pointed a gun at him and screamed at him. Now, legitimately, I'll see police officers like, what's going on with this guy? He's just going through something. Hey, dude, put the bat down. Oh, I'm going to kill you. You're not going to kill anybody, dude. Just have it relaxed. Sit down. I'll buy you coffee. Like, we just talk through it. So seeing that change in the response in policing over the span of my career is the first thing I would offer you. The second thing is, the success is we're not putting people in jail who don't need to go to jail. And something unique about this agency, we will absolutely sweep off the table a crime if we feel your mental health issue is more dominant. So, for example, if I go to a house for a domestic violence incident and find out that maybe that spouse has some PTSD issues and that's why they've lashed out at their significant other, I can't do anything for you. You've committed a felony in the state of California, and I'm going to have to put you in jail. And hopefully in my report, I'll reflect there were some mental health concerns, and maybe somewhere along the way, the court can send you some resources. But for now, you've committed a violent crime. Switch gears now, I find somebody with narcotics, methamphetamine in a park, and I go to talk to that person because they're using drugs in the park, and I identify there's a mental health concern there. I am not obligated by my policy, nor am I expected, even culturally in my agency, to arrest this person for drugs. We can freely say, yeah, he had a bag of meth. I booked that as found property. I did a report, I took him to Tri-City, and we got him help. That wasn't an option even 10 years ago. So we're at a point now where I have a lot more tools in my toolbox than ticket books and handcuffs. And that's just, I guess, the best answer I could give you for that.
Thank you so much. Our last question that we have at the moment in the chat, and we still have a few more minutes, so if anybody else has any other questions they want to ask, please do, and I don't know if this is one you can answer, but it is a very good question. I think it might be just above your pay grade, but how true is it's a good question, but how true is the adage that nothing stops a bullet like a job? How do we get people more jobs?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Stops a bullet, a reduction in violent crime when people are employed? I
think the question is along the lines of a lot of issues of crime or poverty, and if people have access to employment and better jobs, then maybe there would be less crime. I think it is something along those lines.
We might need to pour some drinks to have this conversation. This could be a long one.
Yeah.
I've worked in some significantly wealthier communities, and I've worked in communities where they're economically challenged. And across that spectrum, I don't subscribe personally to poverty leads to crime. And I would say that simply based on the fact that I've arrested as many drunk drivers in the nice communities as I have in the poor communities. Domestic violence rates seem just as parallel. I don't see that difference. What I think happens though, and I could go down a deep rabbit hole, is people work a lot harder to make a buck to pay their rent in a poor community. And quite frequently that leads to parents working 2 jobs or extended hours, and maybe they don't have a car, so their travel to and from work is 4 hours of their day, not 45 minutes or 2 hours or an hour. And they might go further for the work, and that leaves unsupervised children, and idle hands are the devil's workshop. And then I have a generation of young kids who I've had the opportunity to watch kids grow, to with like legit be at that kid's house when he's 12 acting out, and then arrest that kid again when they're 18 for some violent crime, and then see him at 25, and I've watched them progress. And it seems to me the strongest peril I can connect with crime is family. If you have a good, strong, loving family, I think that has an impact on crime personally. And there are more unfortunately broken homes probably in poorer communities for a variety of reasons. I'm not a sociologist. I couldn't tell you why, but I don't think of how much money is in a person's wallet equates to how much crime they will or won't commit.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Anybody got something burning in there? Oh, we have one more raised hand.
Okay, this time I did it on purpose.
Okay.
I'm a retired teacher, including 8 years with Pomona Unified in the late 70s and early 80s. And I'd really appreciate it if you could speak more to how you're addressing the needs of children, including whatever partnership you have with Child Protective Services and meeting the needs of students at all ages, including at the high school level. And I don't know if it's separate or woven in. I also understand it, would like to understand what the trends are in terms of the gangs in Pomona. And I want to echo what you said. I worked all over the district and all over the city. And there were incredibly strong families in some of the lowest income areas I worked in, who I'm still inspired by, having worked in 3 other school districts. That is where I had the strongest, most loving families, was when I was working in Pomona, the families of many of my students, even in gang areas. So thank you.
So sounds to me like the question's kind of open-ended about what are we doing to outreach to the youth, and particularly our partnerships with PUSD. Is that right?
Mute. Well, no, sorry. I'm prone to narrative. Pardon me. Not just in the schools, but yes, usually people are talking about, the high school officers, and that's important, and I appreciate knowing about how that factors out in Pomona, but from the earliest ages of the students. And when you go, one of my frustrations with my students was when the family had violence and the police didn't address violence to children who were in. And so I'm just curious how you approach attending to the children of the city.
Okay, so I feel like that's a very open-ended question. So if I start going down the wrong path, you chime in and redirect me. And thank you for your years of service as an educator, because that is a unbelievably tough, demanding job. And I remember the teachers that impacted me from 4th grade, and I'll never know how to tell them. I mean, so you guys probably impacted people and I didn't even know it. We have a variety of youth outreach programs. Our school resource officers are the first brick of that. I know that in some circles that has been a controversial posting. I don't feel that's the case. I think they're an unbelievable resource. And we were in partnership with PUSD. They couldn't wait to get us back on their campuses. I'd like to see more of them, to be honest with you, than the 2 we have, but we'll get there. We have a Police Explorer program, which allows young kids actually who have an interest in law enforcement career to go through training, they get uniform, they work with our personnel at events. We have our Cops for Kids program. We have a literacy program where our school resource officers carry books, and you can trade a book for a book. just to encourage them, A, to speak to a police officer, and B, to get a free book. And it's a little thing like that just encourages a positive trait. We routinely participate in PUSD conversations. Right now, we are engaged in conversations about how to respond to non-criminal issues on school campuses, and have come to the conclusion that is not something we're going to do any longer. So we haven't historically in Pomona, but we wanted to make sure we nailed that thing down real firm and tight now in the year 2022. So everybody's seen a video of some police officer on some campus somewhere scrapping with some kid because they wouldn't put their phone away or whatever. It's just ridiculous. We're not going to get in that kind of trick bag. So if there's a criminal offense that occurs on a campus that cannot be handled at the administrative level. So if they have a kid brings a marijuana joint or vape pen to a school, we don't need to be involved in that. That is a school issue. They can administratively handle that, whether it's suspension or expulsion or discipline or counseling or restorative practices. That's their handle. If there's a safety issue, threats, weapons, then we'll get involved. And so we've kind of tailored our response to do that for the youth and to sort of increase the efficiency of non-criminal justice intervention into problems. And with the Department of Children and Family Services, when we get what we call a cross report, so a mandated reporter comes across information that a child abuse or a crime against a child may have occurred, and they report that to the Department of Children and Family Services, regardless of where, whether it's in San Diego, here in LA County, whatever, and there's a nexus to our city, we're notified by a massive statewide database. Those incoming reports go right to my computer, and I am the first door, like this guy, Chris Lewis, the first door that opens and reviews every one of those reports. Some of them don't get a response from the police, and some do. The ones that do are where a crime has occurred and it's clear and there's a threat to safety. The ones that don't are maybe a child at age 10 was a victim of a crime within their family, and then 10 years later they report that to a high school counselor or a college counselor who is still a mandated reporter and reports that a crime against a child occurred as they are required to. And that report regenerates, even though we've already been there, responded, maybe even arrested and prosecuted somebody. And we can close that out saying, no, this was handled several years ago. That person's still in prison or custody or whatever. And we can close out that report. So not all reports necessarily get a police response. And we have a DCFS worker assigned to our station. I deal with her daily. So that if I find a child who needs resources that are not police resources, she has just unlimited ability to reach out to people and get what we need. So I hope that answered some of your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Well, I would like to once again thank you so much, Corporal Lewis, for spending your evening with us and giving us all just so much great information tonight. Thank you all for attending this first in a series of programs from our Criminal Justice Reform Committee. I hope to see you at all of the other presentations and programming that they will have in store coming through the over the next year. And have a lovely evening. Goodbye, everyone.